Blackstone. Welcome again to our Sunday school class. We have been taking a look at a book by C.S. Lewis, The Four Loves. And after a prolonged introduction, which was well deserved, Kevin embarked last week upon the first love, which we refer to as affection. The Greek word storge actually does mean affection, but the imagery we have of storge is of that of a mother with an infant, and the love you see there, a nursing mom, and there's a lot of imagery throughout Scripture regarding this type of love or affection. Lewis described it as warm comfortableness. Warm comfortableness, and he also stated that it's the least discriminating of the loves, probably because it's happening while we're not even aware of it in many ways. And he did say, too, that this storge is sort of very foundational or basic. It sort of, in many ways, enters into, if you will, the other loves that we're going to eventually talk about. Storge, it colors, it's present at all times and involves the other loves as well. We stopped off at page 62 in our chapter on affection, and so I just wanted to kind of pick up there because when we got into this topic of affection, we noted right away that at least in Lewis's perspective, that this affection, this storge, involves both a gift love and a need love. First, a need love, in that we need this type of affection from people, and we kind of expect it. Kevin got into a little bit of that last week. So we didn't exhaust, of course, the topic of the need love aspect of storge. But we have to cut it off somewhere and begin, and that's what we're going to do on page 62 as we delve into the second part of this love storge, this affection. And I'm just going to read for you basically where we left off last week and pick up right here at the bottom of page 62 where it says, all these perversions, note that, perversions, all these perversions of affection are mainly connected with affection as a need love, which Kevin was talking about last week. But affection as a gift love has its perversions too. I kind of get the impression, and if you're following along with us and reading this book, that Lewis is going to be bringing out the perversions of all of these loves insofar as it pertains to how human beings display or interact with them. All these perversions of affection are mainly connected with affection as a need love, but affection as a gift love has its perversions too. So let me ask you, first off, to start the discussion going, in our huge class that we have here today, maybe someone out there could just start us off by talking about what does he mean, or is there a specific, maybe one or two, perversion of gift love that you remember Lewis talking about? Mrs. Fidget. Yeah, well, that's an example. And did you laugh when you read that?
Yes.
I read it several times because it was funnier every time I read it. And I have to admit, I was thinking of people. Right? That were you? And if we're honest, we see ourselves in Miss Fidget. Maybe I don't mind reading a little bit of Lewis for our class if you don't, because he says, I'm thinking of. So this Mrs. Fidget I'm guessing was a real person. I don't know, maybe it's a fictitious, but he talks of her as this recent memory. I'm thinking of Mrs. Fidget, who died a few months ago. It is really astonishing how her family have brightened up. The drawn look has gone from her husband's face. He begins to be able to laugh. The younger boy, whom I always had thought an embittered, peevishly little creature, turns out to be quite a human. The elder, who was hardly ever at home except when he was in bed, is nearly always there now and has begun to reorganize the garden. The girl, who was always supposed to be delicate, though I never found out what exactly the trouble was, now has riding lessons, which were once out of the question, dances all night, and plays any amount of tennis. Even the dog, who was never allowed out except on the lead, is now a well-known member of the Lamppost Club in their road. Mrs. Fidget very often said that she lived for her family. She had storge. She had affection for her family. Mrs. Fidget lived for her family, and it was not untrue. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it. She lives for her family, they said. What a wife and mother. She did all the washing. True, she did it badly. And they could have afforded to send it out, the laundry, and they frequently begged her not to do it. It talks about hot lunches that they begged her not to make because they're quite fond of cold lunches. Made no difference. She had to do this. She was living for her family. Mrs. Fidget was. She sat up late. All these other things. She worked her fingers to the bone, it says. That is, they did things for her to help her do things for them which they didn't want. So he's beginning to paint a picture here of people displaying this storge, this affection that is quite demanding of other people. He goes on to say, the vicar says Mrs. Fidget is now at rest. Let us hope she is. What is quite certain is that her family are. So, what's wrong with this affection that Miss Fidget had? Wasn't she a godly woman? She lived for her family. What do we see wrong, or what picture is he painting that's wrong of this type of love that we call affection, storge? Anybody have any thoughts?
Sounded like she had a controlling love, kind of. Like she wanted everything the way she wanted it. Like they had no freedom.
I don't think there was a two-way communication either.
How about that?
She wasn't listening to
Well,
what they were trying to tell her.
If there was anything the likes of two-way communication, it actually went one way and no further, because she didn't listen to a thing
Exactly.
they said. She knew what they needed, and she was loving enough to provide for this. Whether they knew it or not, she worked her fingers to the bone for them. This was a gift love. How can you not like Mrs. Fidget? Any other thoughts about this? You know, it's interesting, and I've brought this up before, okay? As we live long enough, and we look back on our lives even before Christ, our lives before we came to him, it's just interesting how every once in a while you see something about yourself that is just intriguing. And I brought this up before, that how in my younger days, many of the rock groups and songs that became special to me, I look back on now and I say, isn't that interesting? A lot of things which appear to be indicative of Christianity or Christian thoughts. This one group I used to like, Uriah Heep, a song. This is a thing I've never known before. It's called Easy Living. Easy living, and I've been forgiven since you've taken your place in my heart. That's the lyrics. Every day along the winding road, I walked behind you. Every day I tried to find you. Easy living. I've been forgiven since you've taken your place in my heart. I don't know what they meant. They may have not meant anything about Christianity. And I was thinking of another one. Maybe you know the group, the Moody Blues, right? Popular group. One of my favorites back in the late 60s came out with an album called A Question of Balance in 1970. And the title song, Question, was the name of the song, Question. Why do we never get an answer when we're knocking at your door with 1,000 million questions about hate and death and war? Because when we stop and look around us, there's nothing that we need in a world of persecution that is burning in us greed. Why do we never get an answer when we're knocking at your door? Because the truth, it's hard to swallow. That's what the war of love is for. It's not the way that you say it when you do those things to me. It's more the way that you mean it when you tell me what will be. And when you stop and think about it, you won't believe it's true that all the love you've been giving has all been meant for you. I'm looking for someone to change my life. I'm looking for a miracle in my life. And if you could see what it's done to me, to lose the love I knew could safely lead me through. Between the silence of the mountains and the crashing of the sea, there lies a land I once lived in, and she's waiting there for me. But in the gray of the morning, my mind becomes confused between the dead and the sleeping and the road that I must choose.
I'll be humming that in my head all day. I know exactly what song it is.
Yeah, it's very catchy. And you know what it is, Jeff? It's a combination of two songs that they had. That's why that fast pace in the beginning, and all of a sudden it stops and it goes into a very melodic ballad type of song. And it comes out with those words, I'm looking for someone to change my life. I'm looking for a miracle in my life. And then it picks up again. So it's back and forth. You got this fast pace, this slow down, back into the fast pace, back into, it's the merging of two different songs. And it was a very popular one in 1970 when the album came out. And so I'm thinking to myself, man, this is intriguing. And there's another song that has these implications. You won't believe it's true that all the love you've been giving has all been meant for you. Is this Mrs. Fidget or what?
Yeah.
In the
What
book.
song is this? I'm sorry, I came in late.
Yeah, you came in right in the middle.
Sorry.
Moody Blues.
So,
The Moody Blues.
Okay.
I don't
yeah,
know the name of the song.
I was bringing out a song that used to be one of my favorites, and noting how even before I came to Christ, there seemed to be an interest in some of these songs that have these Christian implications, as it were. But anyway, Renee is the one that brought up Mrs. Fidget, so I had to read.
I just wanted to say, my mother was a lot like Mrs. Fidget. She used to do the paint by numbers and give them to us for Christmas. And we're like, no, I don't want to hang that on the wall. But you couldn't actually say that. She meant it,
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
And she'd do the Shieldcraft rugs,
yeah,
the little loop things, and give them to you.
Yeah.
And you're like, ooh,
yeah.
throw it in the basement.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of Mrs. Fidget there.
Well, no one had the heart to not wear the clothes Mrs. Fidget made for them, too.
Right.
Right? And boy, do I resonate with this as well. Like, I can see this in my mom, and growing up in a very heavily Italian family. Some of my, not my parents' level necessarily, but her parents' level, my grandparents and my mom's aunts and uncles could barely speak English. And these were people who they couldn't take a thing from you, but they wanted to give. It was the gift love. And now looking back, you have to wonder, was that a little bit of Mrs. Fidget going on in them as well? Right? She worked her fingers to the bone for her family. She had affection for them. She had storge. And you couldn't tell her no, because she knew what they needed. Any other thoughts about, we're talking now about the first love, affection. Kevin dealt with the need love part of affection fairly well. And now we're delving into the gift love part of affection, taking note that Mrs. Fidget was a fine example. The vicar says, Mrs. Fidget is now at rest. Let us hope she is. What's quite certain is that her family are. And then it goes on to say this, gift of love, this, as we saw it, is a gift love, but one that needs to give, therefore needs to be needed. So what then, if it's possible, what is the proper form of gift love? Since affection, Lewis brought out the fact that there are perversions in the need-love aspect of affection and storge. And now he's saying there's even perversions in the gift-love aspect. But what is a proper, let me put it this way, what does proper gift love look like?
Was it really gift love for Mrs. Fidget if she was actually doing it because she needed to be needed?
I think he's bringing out the fact that it really wasn't. I mean, how can you fault her? You know, this is the fine line between we're fallen human beings, and there's a difference between being fallen and intentionally sinning against people. She certainly wasn't doing that. But in the fallen nature, she was displaying what she felt was this love to her family that was really a need of hers, a need to be needed. So my answer to your question is no. Any thoughts about it as you read through storge, affection, and the gift love aspect of it? What does gift love, or what should gift love really look like?
Where you're giving with nothing in return. It's just pure giving for the sake of what their needs are, without your own needs being thought of as well.
That and not looking for recognition for it, too.
Yeah, well, that's the need part of it. You are right, Jeff, yeah. You don't really need a pat on the back for doing everything.
I suppose that we can display and experience gift love in its proper sense, but in our fallenness, don't go ahead.
It is hard, yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, that you've never sat in a group of people at a birthday party or a baby shower knowing that, wait till they open my gift. I can't wait. No, save that one till last. You know, and we're waiting for the reaction of the person and all the people seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been there.
Aren't we? I mean, it's almost normal in some fashion. Not saying good.
Yeah.
So gift love as storge, affection that we're talking about now, looks like, well, how do we know if we're doing it the right way, there's no recognition? Yeah.
What you said?
But the
How- I mean,
recognition is
how-
what
how- how
messes
would
it
we-
up.
I'm sorry?
It's like if the recognition is what messes it up from getting a true gift.
It
So
does.
it's like, it's circular kind of.
So, my question, which was just cynical,
We're not
basically,
doing it.
was how would we know what gift love looks like if, when done proper, there's no recognition of it? It was just kind of like a play on words in a way.
No, but like if you can give something and not get recognition and not be offended by it, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
You know, I remember my grandmother giving me a gift and I went to her and I thanked her for it, told her why it was so great, and she said, well, go home and write a note. She did. She said that. And so. it
That's
really-
old school.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was just really about propriety and doing it the correct way. Me verbalizing it wasn't enough, so.
Wasn't enough?
Mm-mm.
Oh my,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think the verbalizing it's more personal.
I would,
I think that would
feel
be,
like that, but.
and a hug with it too.
I've known people that at Christmas time, they take the family's name off the tree in the store and they wanna buy them gifts and they're like, well, how are they gonna know that we bought it for them? You know, but that's not what it's about. It's about taking the name, buying the gifts,
Mm-hmm.
giving them without them knowing that you bought it for them.
Right.
But I've known people that have like, well, I want them to know that I bought it for them.
It seems like, does it not, at the very best, Christmas is to, from.
Mm.
And you gotta write it in there.
Well,
It's
yes
actually
and
how-
no, but that's not Christmas according to God, you know, it's to and from, it's to. you
You're
know.
right, yeah.
Again, I've got to quote Lewis on this because but the proper aim of giving is to put the recipient in a state where he no longer needs our gift. We feed children in order that they may soon be able to feed themselves. We teach them in order that they may soon not need our teaching. Thus, a heavy task is laid upon this gift love. It must work toward its own abdication. Is that a well?
Yeah.
Is that not?
Yeah.
There was, President Ronald Reagan had a little plaque on his desk. And it said, there's no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he does not mind who gets the credit. Don't we want the credit? I mean, we say we don't, but even when you give thanks, go home and write me a note. And for all we know, her thoughts might have been pure at heart. I want to be able to take what Laura said and hold on to it and put it in a little plaque and remember it for years to come, and people will see it when I'm gone. Yeah, right? And
She might have even been prompting me so that I would know appropriate, you know, like you send a card.
I'm teaching you.
Yeah, teaching. It could have been a teaching moment,
Yeah.
maybe. It didn't really come off that way to me. As a child.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but anyway.
So, the perversion of storge as a gift love, it's almost impossible not to see that the perversions are just rampant. They're just ingrained. And Lewis is eventually trying to tell us, I think, that the prime example is Christ. I mean, what more perfect example of true storge affection than the example of Christ? And we're told in 1 Peter chapter 2 to look at Christ, right, and pattern ourselves after him and to walk in his steps. So that's the perfect example here. Another thing here. And he's talking about, again, that the perfect or the right demonstration of gift love is a love that doesn't need to be recognized, but also is aware that I'm doing this so that at some point in time you don't even need me anymore. Which is, I'm sure, in a lot of manuals about the proper way to be a leader in an organization. As a parent, yeah, you're setting up, you want your children to become mature and responsible, and once they're off, to not need you in any way. And then when that, or if that starts to happen, we feel hurt. Because we want the attention, we want the appreciation or the note. We want that, and
I think you just want to really be a part of their life.
you want to be a part of it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's really you need the appreciation or any of that. I mean, I don't care if my kids appreciate anything I've done. I just want to be a part of what's going on.
But where it does not, in other words, you're saying where it does not meet the proper example of gift love, the ravenous need to be needed will gratify itself either by keeping its objects needy. Imagine this. Or by inventing for them imaginary needs. I got to read that again. This is awful. The implications of this are terrifying. This is page 66 at the top.
Yeah.
The second sentence down, and of course it often does, but where it does not, the ravenous need to be needed will gratify itself either by keeping its objects needy or by inventing for them imaginary needs. Now we're seeing a bit here of Mrs. Fidget, but the horrible implications of this. And I have to bring up, I thought about this movie that I've mentioned before to you, A Sixth Sense. And I used a different example of it where this little Cole Sear, little kid of 8 or 9 years old, has the horrible, horrible gift of helping people who passed away finish their business. So he's being sought out. If you remember, if you saw the movie, this little Cole is being sought out by people who died. And purpose being is they're needing closure, they're needing help from him to finish some of the unfinished business of their lives. And one example, if we remember, he was somehow driven or called to the house of a young girl who had passed away. She was about 7 or 8 years old. And before her death, she had prepared a video of her mother keeping her sick. And this is horrible thought, because you realize, this little child is so not mature yet, physically, mentally, emotionally. She doesn't even know how to deal with what is obviously going on. She knows her mother is killing her. Maybe not intentionally, maybe just keeping her sick for the attention. This gift love that Mrs. Collins had for her child and the attention and the need drove her to such extremes that she would intentionally keep the child sick. And maybe knowingly murder the child for the attention that it was going to bring her. And they have a name for this because it's not uncommon. Well, I'm sure it's way uncommon, but this syndrome by proxy. Munchausen syndrome by proxy is what Mrs. Collins had. This inordinate, terrifying need to be needed and to have gift love, as whacked out as it was, so recognized that she would go to this extreme. And here little Cole comes along and the girl gives him this video, And through the video, the mother is exposed, which she's been doing all along. A little bit of justification, you know. And then you realize that, you know, in the movie, you're being set up for a kind of surprise ending, entailing Cole's own,
Psychiatry.
yeah. Anyway, I won't ruin it for you. So, I mean, and then another example, this, I don't want to go all the time here. Okay, I've got a few minutes here. But not at all. He says, I am old enough to remember the sad case of Dr. Quartz. Remember his example about Dr. Quartz, who was basically a professor in a college, I believe it was? He made an indelible impression on nearly all of his students. He was the object of much merited hero worship. Naturally and delightfully, they continued to visit him after the tutorial relation had ended, went round to his house of an evening and had famous discussions. But the curious thing is that this never lasted. Sooner or later, it might be within a few months or even a few weeks, came the fatal evening when they knocked on his door and were told that the doctor was engaged. After that, he would always be engaged. They were banished from him forever. They had asserted their independence, differed from the master, and supported their own view, perhaps not without success. Faced with that very independence which he had labored to produce and which was his duty to produce, Dr. Quartz could not bear it. So the distinguished, intelligent professor, high excellence in his ability to teach his students, hopefully leading them to a point where they could do this on their own, at some level needed to turn them away because he couldn't take the fact that now they were able to debate him and win. It's awful. This gift love, which should have led them, like Reagan said, to a point where I don't need the credit. Hopefully you'll go out there because of I've led you along. You'll surpass me. God bless you. You'll be able to debate me. If you know, and he used the example also of the. We should be delighted when it arrives, as the fencing master is delighted when his pupil can pink and disarm him. What master wouldn't be delighted that the pupil could beat him even? Well, the one whose gift love is perverted and who needs to be needed and now can't take any type of lauding of other people. Think of, do you remember this example in the Bible? Where David was yet under King Saul. He was just a young man still. He had just defeated Goliath. And everything he did in leading men into battles, he was victorious. He was whooping up on the Philistines time and time again. You would think that Saul, the king, would look upon David, who played the harp and lyre for him and calmed him down, that he would be just glowing with pride for David. Now he surpassed even the king. And David came home from battle one time. This is 1 Kings 18. David comes home from battle, and all the women came out singing a song that they had made up. And the lyrics of the song were, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands.
Yeah.
And Saul was just irate about the dumb lyrics of the song. It was a song. It was symbolic. David has slain his 10,000, and Saul was like, they ascribed to me 1,000. They ascribed to him 10,000. Right after that, he's trying to kill David. It's awful. I'm sorry.
It was this jealousy.
Jealousy.
Because there's no love there. I mean, you
Well,
know,
he looked at David as a son almost,
he did until,
but,
and
but then
until
it
David
got-
was raised above him.
Yeah.
Like, people were saying things like that, that's not true love. That's like, oh, that works for me.
Yeah,
That worked for him,
Yeah.
but afterwards, it didn't work.
and even while this is developing, you still see affection in Saul for David. And the times that
David
he
him.
supposedly repented, oh, I'm so sorry, and he
But
was,
he keeps coming back to the same thing,
Yeah.
he,
wanting to kill
he
him.
was, he was so focused now on this perversion of the gift love that we call affection, storge. And he was way too far gone. He had to get rid of David. This is awful. This is awful. This is just as bad as the woman killing her child for the attention. That's how perverted this can get. And we can't deny the fact that, not to this extreme, of course, but to some extreme, we're tempted the same way. And it's difficult to put our finger on this, where the line should be drawn. I thought it was funny when he brought out, the more I see of men, the better I like dogs. I've seen that as a bumper sticker, haven't you?
Yeah,
Something like, I saw it this way, the more people I meet, the more I like my dog. But then, this is at the end, but then a love like Mrs. Fitch's contains a good deal of hatred. The last page. Isn't that shocking? But then a love like Mrs. Fitch's contains a good deal of hatred. It was of erotic love that the Roman poet said, I love and hate. But other kinds of love admit the same mixture. They carry in them the seeds of hatred. If affection is made the absolute sovereign of a human life, the seeds will germinate. Love, having become a god, becomes a demon. And the chapter ends. Lewis. Thoughts, questions? We got to end. I'm going to say we're done with storge, affection, and we're going to be moving on to friendship next week. I think Kevin's still gone next week.
Yeah, we're gonna be in Texas next.
Okay, so I'll be picking up with chapter 4, page 73, friendship. We'll start that next week. Father, we thank you for this time together, for the insights you've given to us. And our prayer is that we would, just indeed think about affection, the temptations for the perversion of it, but the way to keep on the straight and narrow is to just keep looking at Jesus, our example, so that we would follow in his footsteps and become more and more like him.